With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us here on the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson here with Lorrie Boyer. Morning, Lorrie.
Good morning.
And with, Nick, I already forgot how to pronounce your last name. Here with our new co-host, Nick Papagni.
Yes, good call.
Right.
Good job. Good
I'm
morning.
so sorry. So the way that for our listeners, the way that our system works, we're not in the same studio, and I can see his name on a screen, and for some reason, the spelling just makes my mind, I don't know. It's hard for me to see the spelling of it and to make the word come out of my mouth. So I apologize, Nick. Nick Papagni, our newest member of the AgNet Media team. Starting next week, you will be taking over co-hosting with Lorrie for the AgNet News Hour. So once again, welcome this morning.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on the varsity team. You guys are awesome.
So Lorrie this week has been out at Commodity Classic, which happened this year in Denver, Colorado. And this is one of the largest ag shows around the nation. I did look it up and I confirmed it is not bigger than World Ag Expo. World Ag Expo is still bigger, but Commodity Classic is pretty much the biggest farm show for Midwestern producers and people who are into soybeans, corn, wheat, are the primary, and also sorghum out there at Commodity Classic. So you've been out at Commodity Classic for the last several days. It is over now. Last day was Tuesday for the show. But tell us, Lorrie, what were some of the exciting things you saw this year?
Yeah, I will point out, since you started with some of the figures there, Sabrina, there were 11,030 people that were registered, and there were 433 confirmed trade booths. So just to kind of give you an idea of the size of this, and the Colorado Convention Center, which is quite large. And I don't know that I ever really figured out my way around because I kept getting lost. So anyway, a lot of discussion on tariffs and a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions on tariffs. And so even though there's a lot of discussion and a lot of people questioning whether or not it's going to hurt us or help us and what that means for consumer prices, I can tell you that it is interesting. The overall feel, though, is farmers are optimistic. And there was a number of them that actually are supporting the strategy of tariffing other countries so that we can get back on a better playing field when it comes to ag trade. It's just going to take a little time and take some rough waters before we get there. But I was surprised about how many people actually supported what's going on. And so there's that. Another hot topic here, of course, was the Farm Bill, but that actually is dying down. I can honestly tell you there was nothing new, nothing I haven't heard before, nothing I haven't interviewed on. But a lot of people who were hoping for the Farm Bill, a lot of the organizations that were really pushing hard to get it through this year, now are a little less optimistic that it's going to get through this year, and instead are looking at next year. So that's a little bit of a change and shift in attitude when it comes to the Farm Bill, Sabrina.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear that conversation has changed so much, because as we know, since 2018, we've had just such a push. It seems like as a reporter, we've had a constant daily, let's work on the next farm bill. Let's work on the next farm bill. Let's work on the next farm bill. And then when that farm bill expired and we did not have one, it became so urgent again. Daily, we've got to have a farm bill. We've got to have a farm bill. To hear that has taken a back seat in these kind of day-to-day conversations, that's really surprising to me, Lorrie.
Yeah. I guess at the beginning of the year, there's so much optimism. As the year's gone on, I had two camps of people. The camp one was, well, we're moving at Trump speed, so the likelihood of getting a farm bill is pretty good. And the second tranche of people were like, well, there are so many other priorities that have popped up for the Trump administration and other priorities going into this year that the Farm Bill wasn't even on the radar for the Trump administration. And so now everybody, and this could change, as we all know, right? This could change.
Right.
The next time we talk. But now it looks like most of our ag leaders are going to start working on putting together their messaging and their talking points for next year to get a farm bill through. So Nick, I will tell you what you will appreciate is that there is a lot of talk about specialty crops in the next farm bill. And even that was brought up here at this kind of more Midwestern focused commodity classic, there is a lot of talk of specialty crops. And even though it is geared toward those major row crops that Sabrina talked about, we have a lot of people here from Michigan, Illinois, of course, Colorado, because that's where it's at too. But all these states have a lot of specialty crops that are grown there. And so that was actually brought up a few times. So yeah, and that's good news. As Sabrina and I have mentioned in the past, specialty crops hasn't always been at the forefront. So I think that's good. So as we continue Farm Bill discussions, Nick, I think that you will appreciate the fact, especially being right there in the Central Valley, the specialty crops are getting more attention and more recognition, a little bit more probably than ever before, but especially with the discussions in the Farm Bill now, they're really coming to a higher level. So I think that's good for farmers in the area.
Yeah, I think it really is. And I think that everyone's just so waiting to see how all the tariffs and how everything else is going to work out. We're a waiting mode right now. So I think all the farmers are, I guess we just have to wait and see what happens. And every day is going to be different.
Yeah, and just a reminder, this is a good reminder for me as well. It was brought up 15% of the Farm Bill is actually farm related. The rest of it, the 45% of it actually goes to social programs like the SNAP program and some of the other WIC, kind of some of those other programs for underserved folks and, just to help out some of the lower income communities. So there is, there is so much of the farm community that needs addressed in the Farm Bill. And they are doing that. Conservation, of course, is included, as Sabrina and I have highlighted before. The Forest Service is also included in the Farm Bill and under the auspices of USDA. But a lot of it goes into those programs. There was not a lot of discussion, of course, on those programs because I'm with farmers and nobody's really an expert there. But hopefully that's not going to be a sticking point in trying to get one in next year. And like I said, this conversation could look a lot different in a couple months.
Yeah. We're talking this morning about Commodity Classic, which was just held in Denver, and it's one of the largest farm shows for the Midwestern farmers and for row crop farmers. And we talked a little bit about some of the conversations that are going on out there. And we were talking about tariffs, which did finally go into place on Tuesday for Mexico and Canada, and tariffs also coming up, additional tariffs for China as well. And these are going to have an effect on agriculture, short-term and long-term effects, different for each. But to see, to listen to some of the conversations that are happening about tariffs at this time, again, like we were saying, just a lot of uncertainty right now, Lorrie.
Yeah, exactly. So between the tariffs and the Farm Bill, there is uncertainty. But like I said before the break, the optimism is pretty amazing. As we know, farmers have to be the eternal optimists to do what they do anyway. Other things that were brought up here, I guess, as far as issues and policy was, I get one more big one, I guess. And then I want to talk just a little bit about some of the other things that are at the show. But the other policy point that was brought up is E85, year-round sales of E85. So currently there are 7 states that the EPA has approved for year-round sales of E85, and that does not include California. Those are still set to go into effect in April. But these groups out here are really pushing for all 50 states to have permission to sell E85 year round. And there is a lot of infrastructure and a lot of the rules and regulations that have already been drafted and are ready to go. And there's been a lot of improvements to the facilities that will be producing this. And so now they're trying to get EPA to approve all 50 states selling E85. Of course, these farm groups promote the fact that it is a cleaner burning fuel, that it's more cost effective, it keeps the farm economy going, but it also still has sales of our traditional gasoline and petroleum products. So you're not just ruling them out. So that is something else that everyone is pushing pretty hard for without a lot of answers at this point. But EPA is aware of the desire of the farm economy, the farm industry, to really want to get that put into place. So I'll stop there on the policy discussions. And any questions, Nick or Sabrina, on that?
I find the E85 conversation so interesting, especially from a California perspective, because where it's more the Midwestern growers who are producing the crops for that, for the fuel, there is a lot of processing that happens in California, but also it's such an important topic just for California drivers because of gas prices out in California and the fact that E85 can save you so much money at the gas pumps. So it's an important topic, even though maybe not necessarily from an agricultural standpoint, it still touches the life of every driving Californian because, I mean, let me tell you, those gas prices, Nick, they hurt, don't they?
And it's very, yeah, and everyone is just, it's well anywhere from 5 to 5.85 a gallon right now in California, and people are just like, what's going on? We need to figure it out in a hurry, and I hope it happens. And I don't know if it will or not, but yes, California gas prices, when people come here, they just have no idea what we have to live with, and hopefully it changes, and we're all hoping it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the only place that is worse, this is just a brief opinion, but like Hawaii, they have terrible gas prices. So one of the few that's worse than California, just it's just incredible.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're high everywhere, but yeah, California is always higher on everything. So I
Yeah.
don't doubt what either one of you are saying for sure. And then just briefly here, a lot of new technology brought to the table, a lot of educational sessions. I think that one of the bigger things in as far as new technology, of course, precision agriculture is always a topic of discussion. And retrofitting tractors is another thing. There's more and more vendors out there that are doing retrofitting type things because farmers not only can they not afford to buy new machinery, but also they're finding it more cost effective just in general to retrofit some of the new machinery for things they need. And I asked about like new technology and precision ag and the software programs that run them. And many of the retrofits have programs that will filter right into their current software programs. I also asked one of the vendors about like proprietary software. So for, example, John Deere that has their own proprietary, can you retrofit and also use our software? Those are still some things that are being worked on and trying to figure out. But I guess that there's like bridge technology that will help with that. So it's hard to wrap your mind around all that,
Yeah.
but also interesting at the same time.
We're talking about Commodity Classic and some of the conversations and things that Lorrie had while she was out there covering it in Denver this year. And we were just talking about retrofitting tractors and things. This is something that I've had conversations with many people when I was out at FIRA and also out at the World Ag Expo, because a lot of the new technology is for equipment or that again going into retrofitting the tractors. It is an interesting topic because of as technology is advancing and as technology and equipment is advancing, maybe you don't want to go out and buy the whole new tractor or combine or whatever, but if there's a way to retrofit with something that it can bring you up to speed with technology for the technology, but also be a little bit more cost efficient, right?
Yes. And sometimes it's a great big retrofit. Say they need a new grain cart, or maybe they need a new combine head that's even larger in row crops. Sometimes they need a smaller one, a smaller grain cart. So there it goes both ways. And then the person I talked to yesterday also said that sometimes it's just a matter of some nuts and bolts that need retrofitted. So all kinds of different instances on who is using it for what reasons. But the fact that retrofitting is available, I think, is pretty amazing. The other topic, and Nick, I think you'll appreciate this as well, is biostimulants continues to come into play. And this is all across the country, including California in the specialty crops industry. And that's basically, from what I understand on biostimulants, or biologicals, you can go back and forth on the terminology there, is it is using a natural product in a natural setting. And then also using regenerative, climate smart friendly type farming where you're using some cover crops, where maybe you are using crop rotations, you're creating that soil health, that soil profile, you're using residuals so that you have less passes in the field and less chemicals in the field. That was a pretty big topic as well. It has been for a long time, but it's going to continue. And we saw that here at Commodity Classic.
And I think that's a great idea for farming now. Being that niche farmer, cutting cost out for labor, any way they can improve farming. I know California farmers, Arizona farmers will definitely look at something like that. So that's exciting news for the future.
And you brought up cutting costs. And I will say that I had another interview with another person yesterday, and we were talking about just that, like for weed control, for example, that farmers are really wanting to cut costs. So they're thinking about cutting back, or they're thinking about maybe not even treating this field. But he's warning farmers to really take into consideration the longer term effects on that. So if you make that change now, maybe this year you're going to save some money. But in the long term, are you really going to save money? Because you might have to make bigger changes than you expect, whether or not you change the crop out because of this decision, or whether or not you have to use additional applications because of this decision. I knew that logically, I know that, but it took someone else saying that out loud to really think about that. So each farmer has a case by case basis on that. But I think it was really a good point to really talk about this year. Yes, you want that cash in your pocket or what have you, but in the long term, does it really save you money? And that's something that farmers need to look at.
No doubt for sure. That's right. It's almost year to year because everything changes so much. For example, the tariffs, we don't know what's going to happen. Farming in the following years, we don't know what's going to happen with weather and all the other different things. But you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So that was another topic. And let's see, there's so many other things, not as many robotics as Sabrina probably saw at World Ag Expo. So there wasn't a whole lot in there, just a little bit on that. Some new products that are coming out. Here's an interesting thing for you. And stop me if I already mentioned this last time I talked about Commodity Classic, but this is fascinating to me. So the American Soybean Association is looking, of course, for ways to use soybeans. And anytime you put on a pair of Skechers shoes, the sole has soy in them, American soy. But here's a new thing. They've actually contracted out with the University of Colorado in Boulder, and they are working on putting together a firefighting foam. So that it would help, obviously, in the instances of fire, but it would include a lot of soy product in that. So I don't know. I just find it fascinating how innovative this industry is. And I love talking about these new things. It's one of my favorite things to cover is new technology and innovation in agriculture.
Hey, I
Yeah,
just
and
bought some Skechers, so I'm excited to help out.
that firefighting foam too. That a big thing about that as well is that right now there's the talk of the forever chemicals in the firefighting foam, and so the new firefighting foam that they're creating doesn't have those, and they're able to use soy products or soy as a product in that. So that could be really interesting. I find it neat too. In fact, also I just bought another pair of Skechers as well. I just think it's really interesting. That was one of the things I learned previously from the soy. I forget which organization it is, but just all the things that soy goes into your tires, your tennis shoes, firefighting foam, all this stuff. It is really neat the things that you can learn. Talking this morning about all kinds of things that Lorrie talked about out at the Commodity Classic, which was held over the last few days in Denver. Most recently, we were talking about soy and all the things that soy is used for. And like we mentioned, shoes, tires, firefighting foam, fuel, of course, and all kinds of other things. These are the types of conversations out at Commodity Classic that I always found to be very interesting. And one of the reasons why I did enjoy going, even though it's not necessarily the crops that we focus on in California, but there's always so much to learn out there.
Yeah, yeah. And I will point out that some of the seed development for these crops is developed right there in California.
Yeah.
And so there is that connection. And there is a lot of research that the University of California does on these actual row crop commodities, which is that's a fascinating in itself that you have these world renowned researchers in California, but they're doing research on things that aren't necessarily in their backyard. And even Sabrina, you and I've talked about it in the past. Oh gosh, I think it's called subsidence land sinking research being done and at other areas like on the East Coast, but looking at California as some of their examples, as like some of their test areas for this. So I love how research is allocated, and I don't know how it's allocated, but it's cool.
It is pretty neat. I agree that you can research things that are relevant 1,000 miles away and not necessarily in the area where you're researching it. Love it. I love agricultural research. Fully support. Also, we were talking about the four main crops involved there at Commodity Classic. Again, soybeans, of course, corn, wheat, and then sorghum also. And sorghum is one of those crops that I think, I don't know, it snuck up on me a little bit. I feel like Earlier in my career, I hadn't heard much about sorghum at all, but it's gained a lot more in popularity. And that's one of the crops that does a lot of things out there at Commodity Classic. And I feel like it's growing every year.
It is growing, and sorghum is a neat crop. It's not a very popular crop across the country. I think it's very geographic where it's grown,
Yeah.
primarily in Texas. It is a drought tolerant crop. We do have a little bit encroaching into Colorado because of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so sorghum is becoming more popular as far as its uses as well. And the big push for it right now is sustainable aviation fuel. And of course, mostly sorghum is used for feed products. I don't know that there's as much innovation as we just talked about with the soy into our everyday life products, but a lot of feed, but also this sustainable aviation fuel that is coming whether we like it or not. And I know there's not as much talk in the Trump administration on that at this point, but the other countries are. And I was actually told by an economist, an ag economist here not too long ago, that it's going to have to come up one way or another because these other countries are pushing for it. And in order for us to stay up to date, and also eventually, if we don't start using it, countries aren't going to allow us to fly into their countries. And so, and
Yeah.
consumers want it. So yeah, that's where their big push is right now. Just a little other note on them. The national sorghum producers have entered into, this was their big press conference yesterday, have entered into an agreement with Ducks Unlimited, and they're going to do this huge national push for water conservation and water projects with the Ducks Unlimited chapters. And I don't have all the details, and I don't remember if they even gave all the details at this point. This is just a big collaboration that was announced, but they're trying to address water conservation for farmers and water conservation for Ducks Unlimited, and of course, all the habitat community.
Yeah. Sorghum is becoming a bigger crop in California as well, largely due to the drought tolerance of it. It's not a huge crop yet in California, but it has been gaining in popularity. Again, anytime we have a crop that's drought tolerant, that is helpful for the state. And their partnership with Ducks Unlimited, I think, is there's a lot of room for that to benefit both organizations. It's one of those that's almost a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, I think so as well. So, Nick, have you talked about sorghum and what the things you've done?
We have not yet, but I do know in the farming world that it's a copycat industry. And if it's working, people will definitely look into it. It happened in the almond industry. People started jumping on almond. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea, especially with the issues with in California would jump all over that.
Yeah.
So
So that's, of course, was talked about. Sabrina?
I was just going to say the partnership between sorghum and Ducks Unlimited also makes me think of California rice and the habitat they do for wild birds. And gosh, it escapes me. I can't think of the organization, the bird organization. But the California rice growers have had a partnership like that where there's this beautiful symbiotic relationship between rice and the wild birds. And the wild birds almost depend on our California rice acreage just to help their existence along. So those kinds of partnerships I always find to be so interesting because it really shows how agriculture are like the original farmers are the original stewards of the land. And there's so many environmental groups that have all these issues with agriculture taking up the land and what it's doing for wildlife and things like that. But these stories like that go to show that how much agriculture actually can help with wildlife.
Absolutely. And I think it doesn't hurt anything from the optics side of things. So when agriculture needs a little extra help here and there, maybe in the form of programs or things like that, even in talking about workers, it doesn't hurt them to show that we've got this great partnership going on. It's sustainable. The industry is sustainable. So getting some of that help on the other side, to me, I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there, assumptions, if you will. To me, it feels like the optics are good on these types of programs. I hope they do indeed result in the things that these folks want them to result in.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they're actually reaching that end goal, that is fantastic. We can't have words without action and actions without results, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things that we'll get to watch as the years go on and see how that partnership does. And it's nice to see everything moving in the right direction too, and with good intents. I always appreciate that.
Yeah, me too. We like when we can say positive things.
Sometimes it's hard to find those positives. Welcome back once again. We've been talking this morning about Commodity Classic and some of the conversations had out there, but I'm going to completely change it over to something that I was reading about this morning. And to be fair to Lorrie and Nick, I did not give them any prep time on this, so we're just going to go off the cuff. But there has been a movement previously to put nutrition labels on wine bottles. And that movement has died down a little bit. It's not sure if that's going to continue. It was from the whatever the federal agency is that does nutrition labels. And so my question to the both of you is, how much do you look for nutrition in wine? Do you care how much vitamin A your wine has, or what the protein content? The protein content, I would assume, is going to be basically nothing. So are you guys looking for like nutritional information when you drink wine? Lorrie, I know you are a health nut, so I'm going to start that question with you.
I would say that, that's a good question. It's fair. I would say in general, no, because when I partake in my adult beverages, it's usually planned. It's planned calories. It's something I know that I'm going to do. It's usually, of course, later in the afternoon or evening when I do it. So I kind of plan that into the day. And I like all different kinds of wines. I like dry, I like semi-sweet, and I like sweet. But I am aware of the fact that sweet wine has a lot more sugar. Semi-sweet has more sugar. The drier wines don't have as much. So oftentimes I will pick a drier wine based on that. I guess that's just information that I've read and heard over the years, not necessarily on a label. So I would say not necessarily. I don't really look at the labels. I just know in the back of my head which one I would have for that day.
Yeah. How about you, Nick?
I'm completely agree. I never look, and that's probably horrible on my part. If it's bad, I just go. I tell myself I'm going to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym, get a better workout. But I don't look at that at all, and maybe I should, but I just have never have.
So we don't. I try not to buy things that require nutrition labels. My thing, I try to stay away from processed foods and things so that I don't have to look at nutrition labels. Like my apple doesn't come with a nutrition label. My arugula or whatever it is. So I try to stick with those things. And it's not for any other reason than I've had a lot of health problems in my life. So I try to just do better. But that aside, I think that like you said, Lorrie, or even Nick, both of you, when you're drinking a glass of wine, you're drinking a glass of wine. You're not doing it to meet your protein goal for the day, right?
Yeah, you know exactly. Going in, you're getting. So
right.
Yeah.
I can estimate a glass of red wine has 250 calories. I just know that. And I don't really need a nutrition label. But I wonder if the idea behind it originally was to give consumers more information. So what the whole idea of nutrition labels is for us to be able to make healthier choices. I don't really know how that applies to wine.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, my question, I'm just throwing it out there. If labels are important on wine, why haven't they been done before?
Right.
Why is this new? I guess I don't really know. It seems odd to me, doesn't it? Or not?
I don't know. I agree. Wine's been around for many years. So yeah, if this was important, why hasn't it already been done? This article that I was reading, which is on the website winesearcher.com, and it talks about that maybe there's different information that would be good to have on wine, such as, is there a way to use body weight versus serving size? If you're 100-pound female, this is going to, one glass is 6 ounces, and this is how, what your blood alcohol content can go up to, or something to that effect. Whereas if you're a male who's 230 pounds, it's different. That information might be more useful.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. Yeah. Huh.
That was something that was brought up by this article as well. I didn't come up with that idea on my own. But when it comes to nutrition labels, that's something we've talked about a little bit on this show, is nutrition labels and labeling just in general. And, there are a lot of label keywords out there, I'll say, that promote like the green effect. I use this with air quotes, please pardon the air quotes, but to make it feel like it's healthier. If you see organic wine, consumers automatically assume that's a healthier wine, whereas it may not be. Those kind of labels are being used on wine. It's starting to be used a little bit more on wine, but I've never seen a wine bottle with any type of a nutrition label.
Yeah, I haven't either.
So I'm just wondering if somebody came out with, maybe it's a new marketing campaign. They're going to try it. They're going to throw it out there and see if it works, because everyone's trying something different. And I don't know if that would work or not, to be honest. No one knows.
The idea of this was originally from, like I said, from the not the Food and Drug Administration, but oh my gosh, it's just completely blank. The federal organization that does the nutrition labels. So the idea stemmed from them. So not necessarily marketing, but more like this is a food item or a beverage item. All the rest of them have nutrition labels. Why does this not have a nutrition label? We should do this. That I can see, yeah, sure. Everything else we buy does have a nutrition label on it. So why does wine not? But again, is it really needed? This comes down to also think about the cost that this is going to go for winemakers having to change all of their labels if this is enacted. So I can see that being why the wine industry is speaking up on it.
Yeah, yeah. And also, according to the information you sent us, it points out the fact that wine is not really a recipe product. The vintages are each different. Do you know how much money this would end up costing winemakers, because they'd have to reprint labels all the time?
Yeah, I think you just hit on the key point, Lorrie. We are talking about nutrition labels on wine, and we're talking mostly about the idea of it because it hasn't actually happened yet, but it was posed. The government was moving toward that. They've slowed down with everything else going on. But just before the break, Lorrie, you brought up the fact that these labels would have to constantly be changed because every year the wine is different. You can buy a red wine from your favorite winemaker, and the 2022 vintage is going to be different from the 2023, and that's going to require a different label. And that's not just, we're not looking at just the cost of the label, but we're looking at the testing that has to be done with every single vintage of wine to see what the nutritional content is. That's going to be costly.
Yeah, exactly. And they print these off months ahead, getting ready for these bottles to come out, or getting ready for the wine to be released. So you would, gosh, I don't know. I guess if you know exactly what the nutrition is, that wouldn't be as big of a problem. I guess I don't know enough about the speak how that works. If you have to test after the vintage is ready for market or before.
Because we know that wine is constantly changing too. The longer you leave wine in a bottle, it's going to change a bit. I say we all, but I don't know if that for a fact, but I know for me, I have more than once had an inexpensive bottle of wine that I let sit around too long, pop it open, and it's vinegar. So I know that wine changes in the bottle.
I would love to do an AgNet news poll on this, and I would bet a lot of people wouldn't like it if the wine industry is not going to like doing this. So I'm just wondering what the people that are buying wine would think of this.
And how much it's not really going to affect. I would not buy a bottle of wine because it had a nutrition label. I'm not going to look at it and say, oh no, that tells me how much sugar in this and this. I don't want it.
That's right. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I don't think that it doesn't really affect me as a buyer much. It's just not something that I need.
Yeah.
Right.
I would bet price would be more effective for people than a label.
And if the labeling requirement makes the price go up, then it's going to affect buying habits.
100%.
Yeah. But again, I don't really want to know the nutrition value of my wine. I just want to know if I'm going to like it and if it's going to go well with my steak.
There you go. There's your news poll done.
That's what needs to be on the label right there.
Right. Exactly. Serve this with your, whatever steak. That's the label that I need on the wine, is more like pairing recommendations. I did do it. We're almost out of time here, but I did do an interview a few months back with a company, the leader of a company that created this computer program that could tell you about a specific brand of wine, a specific type of wine, and whether or not you would like it just based on if you like other things. So like you'd take this survey, and if you like chocolate and you like cheese and you like olive oil and jalapenos or whatever, it then says, since you love those things, you will really enjoy this particular bottle of wine. I happen to think that's brilliant.
I like that too.
Yeah. They're working on making it available in liquor stores and places where wine is bought. So you can stand in the store and take the little survey, and then it'll direct you over to the bottle of wine that you want. And brilliance right there. That's the technology we need.
Well, there. Yeah. Problem solved, Sabrina. See?
All right. We are just about out of time. We're going to leave it on that happy note.
Cheers.
Cheers. There you go. Cheers, Nick.
Cheers, salute.
All right. That's all the time that we have for us today. We will be back tomorrow with more topics, maybe not necessarily wine. This has been the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson here with Lorrie Boyer and Nick Papagni. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.